George, you ready? Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Town of Monroe May 9th Planning Board Workshop. Noreen, if you can start with a roll call.
Anthony Vaccaro.
Here.
Lisa McQuaid.
Here.
Bonnie Franson is absent. James McKnight.
Here.
Jason Sawinski.
Here.
Jeff Manson.
Here.
John Allegro.
Here.
Okay, Jeff will be acting as chair this evening.
Let me just start by pointing out fire exits. The primary fire exit is the main entrance that we all enter the building from. There's also secondary exits down the hall here and through the room behind us and out to the parking lot. If I can ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd just like to mention that we don't have the laptop tonight, so we won't be viewing items on the screen. Everything will be from the plans in front of you. As we're bringing up applicants, that would be a good time to open up all of your plans for the next thing that we're talking about, and then once we're all settled, we'll move on with that. Our first item on the agenda was a new project, but we're moving past that. That would have been 150 Valley View. So moving right along. First up tonight, Meadow Hill Subdivision.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Joe Fowl. I represent the applicant on this project. We were here in January, and you may recall this was previously an 8-lot subdivision. All of the road frontages along Lakes Road, and we at that time presented both a sketch plan and a cluster plan, as well as the resource plan. We did have some general discussions about the cluster plan versus the sketch plan. But then we kind of went back a little bit because we did not at that time have finalized wetlands. They were approximated, and this plan represents a full wetland delineation done by North Country Ecological. And what that did was actually the two wetlands to the south got smaller than what was originally presented, but we also have an isolated wetland all the way to the north end of the property. So what that did was we ended up going on our conventional plan from 8 lots down to 7 lots. We also presented a new cluster plan representing the 7 lots as well. I know at the last meeting we talked about going to Orange County Department of Public Works to review the driveway. But it was decided, and also we talked about circulating for secret, but it was decided to wait until the wetland delineations were complete to see if there were any changes. It was a good call because the layout did change slightly, losing the 1 lot. So we're here tonight to review this sketch along with the cluster sketch, get some feedback. I don't know if it's too early to go with one plan or another, but we would certainly like to at least get to the point where we can start circulating for secret and submit to Orange County Department of Public Works, so they can get their input on the driveway locations. And that's pretty much where we are right now.
Okay, so yeah, let's start there. Has anyone had a chance to take a look at the new submissions and feelings on the conventional layout versus the cluster, and either questions about that or comments?
I have a question. Forgive my my newness, but I'm looking at lot 4 on the conventional plan, and maybe Mike, maybe you can answer. Is there a setback requirement distance from a wetland?
For DEC, they require a 100-foot buffer around the wetlands, but these are Army Corps wetlands, which do not require a buffer. However, the town code may around all wetlands. I believe that's 100 foot around all wetlands.
Yeah, we'd have to check the code, and see if I can do it while we're talking.
Yeah, I believe that any work within disturbance within 100 foot of the Army Corps wetland and would require a local wetland permit from the town. And I believe it would be this board, right, the planning board?
Yes.
I believe so.
So are all disturbances more than 100 feet from? Is
I'm
that-
sorry?
So is that a concern with the way the plan is laid out, that we would be within that? Area?
Right now, lot 4, we got some 60 scale here. Lot 4 certainly has encroachments in the 100-foot buffer, and I believe a small portion of lot 1 as well.
Under the local code, there is not a prohibition on construction within the buffer area. You need a permit from the board. Discretionary, doesn't have to be granted. But if we're looking again at the issue of whether it's approvable, we get into that gray area yet again. It's not a prohibition.
And on the other end, in the cluster plan, as it's laid out, we're completely out of wetlands. That plan is laid out to preserve, I believe, we have, out of our total 13-acre site, we are proposing to put a conservation easement on a little over 8 acres of it.
It's out of 13, you said?
Yes,
Out
out
of
of
13.
13, correct.
Joe, just a mention, you had said we decided not to send out the secret lead agency notice of intent. We actually did in
Oh, you did?
January, and we got a response from the DEC. I don't know if we received one from anyone else.
Is there any way I could get a copy of that?
Sure.
Okay.
Noreen, can you probably have one if we could send it to them. Makes
You
sense.
can have this one, I did on the hard copy in the
Okay.
office.
Now, that's Orange County Planning.
Oops.
They may have sent one too.
Oh.
I don't have that, but I do have the DEC one.
You have that in your packet I just gave you.
Oh, okay.
So the
I
DEC
didn't
one I
get to
don't
that
have
yet.
with me. That one should have been distributed earlier, but you can have this one. And I'll make a note to get you the other one.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so what it sounds like to me is what you're saying is that although on the conventional plan, there might be additional permits that are required, it's still conceivable.
It is,
Right,
right,
as sketched out.
yes.
Other questions, comments?
Yeah, I was just wondering, it doesn't show the dimensions on the lots. Wondering if you could speak to that, on the cluster plan. What
The
are
actual areas?
I see the areas, but I don't see
Oh,
any
the lot, I'm sorry. You
lot
know
line
what?
dimensions.
They're on, they did not print. I do have the proposed bulk requirements, so the lots are 100 foot in width. You're right, I don't have the depths on there, but all of those lots in the cluster plan are 100 foot lot width.
Eventually, we'll want to see the setbacks, because the board will require, if they approve the cluster, that the setbacks shown on the plan become the setbacks for the project, meaning
Okay.
that anything that's built beyond where they're shown would require a variance.
Okay. And,
It's as if we assign a bulk table to the project based upon what you show.
and I proposed a bulk table, so if you guys want to take a look at it, but that's what I have. I have 100 foot lot width, a 50 foot front yard, the side yards are
There you go.
15, and the rear yard is 60. So I actually maintained the front and rear yards from the regular zoning. You know, I know there was a concern about the scenic corridor, so we kept the lots set back based on the regular zoning. And we've also provided a 25-foot buffers of the scenic buffer zone that's in the code.
It looks like lots 4 through 7 are pretty much the smaller lots
They're all 0.6 to 0.66 acres.
in terms of width.
Oh, they're all 100 foot wide,
Okay.
except for lot 1, that's like the narrowest lot.
So the house footprint that you show, is that a typical that you're planning to propose?
Yeah, it's those footprints are 50 by 30, fairly typical. It's a 1,500 square foot box, so if it was 2-story, it's. But any house that would be built would have to fall within those setback lines.
I had a question in relation to the scenic buffer. So looking at the one plan where there's a proposal to, I guess it's around, well, what would be lots 2 and 3, to improve the sight lines, there's gonna be some clearing?
Yes.
So how does that work with maintaining the scenic buffer zone, but also doing some clearing?
Well, if you go out there and you look at that particular area, there's really no trees in that area. What it is, it's a lot of, there's some scrub, a couple of dead, we could actually, I don't know if you guys ever wanna take a site visit, but if you look in that particular area, the tree line is pushed way back, and what you have there is there's a bunch of just shrubs and some vines, some dead trees because the vines have taken them out. So I don't see anything significant in that area that we're taking out, because I was actually out there personally when we figured out where that line was gonna go.
So nothing particularly scenic in that area?
No, but I suppose what we could do is, where that sight line is, we could take that 25-foot buffer and run it 25 foot beyond that sight line, so that beyond that sight line clearing area, we could maintain a buffer past that.
Yeah, because it doesn't sound like it's, in that area, it's much of a buffer. And, then if you're gonna remove what's remaining,
Well, I could also move that setback line up in that area as well, so actually where the sight line is, I could go 25 foot beyond that, and I could use my 50-foot setback from the sight line, so that in that area, you'll have that maintained consistency along the whole roadway, just will be a little bit further back from the road.
does that make sense to the board?
Yeah, the current buffer, it just makes it look like it's part of the right-of-way anyway. So I don't see a particular advantage of calling it scenic buffer.
I believe it's beyond the right of way, right? The dark line along the road, about 10 feet back from the edge of pavement is a.
Yeah, well, I guess my point is you're calling it a scenic buffer, but, what exactly would that mean? No construction there, or fences, or?
There's
I'm not
a-
sure why the designation.
Yeah, there's a list of things that they want there. They don't want tree removal. There's a whole list in the code. As a matter of fact, I didn't know whether or not, typically with these subdivisions, if you put the notations right on the plans, because there's about 4 or 5 different requirements that they want.
Essentially, there'd be no clearing or grading except for the driveways
Correct.
in those areas.
Correct.
Yeah,
And I think that's intended for the property owner. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I think I would consider this clearing a part of the subdivision process. And then that's why I was thinking, go 25 foot beyond that for that tree clearing. Because I think that's something that'll go in everybody's deeds, and that'll be a restriction that individual property owners will have to adhere to, so they don't clear out in front of their, all on that 25 foot.
right. Yeah, Lakes Road is one of the roads that was designated as part of the comprehensive plan as a scenic road. So it was suggested along scenic roads, certain things not be, built within such an area, and to maintain the scenic nature of the road, that, right, not excess clearing of vegetation, except for access and that sort of thing. So that's really what that provides, and that translated into the zoning. from
I
there.
think also we've hired out to do a tree preservation plan? What's the terminology? Tree survey, I guess.
Tree inventory?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think when that's done and you see what's in that 25-foot buffer, it'll give you a better idea of what you're saving and what you're not saving. It's a fairly young woods. If you go back there, there's not a lot of monster trees back there, so to speak.
It looks like Lot 3 has some steep slopes in the proposed septic system area. Does that conform to,
It conforms, yes it does. Actually, the only slopes that we were required to indicate, but is the 30% slopes. But I'll verify that.
okay.
And just to
thank
let you know, this has to go to Orange County Health Department for review as well for the sanitary and water supply facilities.
I have a question.
Where on Lakes Road is this, like, in
Take your
relation
microphone
to?
down. There we
Where on Lakes Road is this in relation to, like, where that blinking light would be near the roof? Because I see, you know, we're going out towards Greenwood Lake. I'm thinking like where the firehouse
Yeah,
would be.
if you're
Is it
going towards
farther
Greenwood Lake,
past the
it's
firehouse?
there's one small property past Camp Monroe Road, and then it starts there. So it's, and it goes, it's got a lot of frontage, and it ends up, the end of the property is right across the street is where that solar,
Okay.
Where's the solar thing?
yeah.
Where were you saying the solar thing was in relation?
At the southern end of the property,
You mean like
right
lot?
across the street.
From lot 1 through
Yes.
somewhere just north of lot 3,
Yeah,
right?
and as you're going towards Greenwood Lake, there's a private road on the left. That's just past our property. That goes back, it serves like 4 or 5 houses back there. That road. Yeah, it's just a little private road.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that when I was reviewing it last night, the cluster layout, and added up the acreage of the properties for the 7 lots, and saw how much in comparison is being proposed for conservation easement, I thought that was very positive. You know, obviously a lot of that's necessitated by the areas of the wetlands, but it's a significant portion of the property.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, I mean.
And then I guess the only
yeah.
question is if we did go with the cluster plan, would, I mean, we don't have to decide that now, but where that, you know, we put it all into one lot or divvied up amongst lots and just everybody has conservation easements.
Yeah, the way the code reads, you have a hierarchy of how you do the conservation easement. One would make the town a grantee, and conceivably they would take title. I doubt it, but the conservation easement would just be the restriction. The second tier in the hierarchy would be a land trust designated by the town board. We've run into the difficulty, or at least it seems we will, on Eagle Ridge, if the town doesn't want to be the grantee, and if a not-for-profit land trust doesn't want to be the grantee of the conservation easement, we don't have a third tier. And while we'll talk about that on that project, my recommendation would be that we make a recommendation to the town board that a restrictive covenant imposing the same restrictions as the conservation easement would have, and giving to the town the authority but not the duty to enforce would substitute. That doesn't answer your question though, because in all 3 of those scenarios, it would be only encumbered by the conservation easement. It would not be a fee interest in land. I'm not sure that we would want to see it created as a new lot, because you run into the possibility that it gets assigned a lot number by real property tax service. Somebody picks it up at tax sale and we have confusion. So it may be that we need to glue it onto one of the lots.
Okay.
But we don't have to decide that tonight.
Other questions, comments? Okay, so,
I guess at some point what Joe's gonna look for is determination that the conventional plan is satisfactory and the yield that it chose is appropriate, and then what further changes you would wanna make to the cluster plan before it would be ready for a secret declaration, public hearing, et cetera.
okay,
And we also would like to, if the plans look okay to submit, I think it has to go through the town to Orange County Department of Public Works. Now that but I guess,
but that would be under either plan, because it's right, you're talking about an issue of sight lines and where the driveways are, and that
they
kind of.
could probably review both plans, because most of the driveways are in the same locations. They're just, it's a matter of there's more, there's,
They'd probably prefer to see one plan. You know.
I would think so. So, what's the feeling of the board? Do you feel like either of the plans need more work? How do we feel about the conventional plan and the yield that is proposed? And are we potentially ready to make a decision on which plan we prefer tonight?
I'll go first. First,
Thanks, Jason.
my question for you is has the developer proposed bedroom count for the proposed houses yet?
they will be 4-bedroom houses.
4-bedroom, and so, Sean, would that impact DPW's review process?
It may be in terms of, you know, whatever the traffic impact is in terms of volume, but
I'm also noticing the sewage disposal systems in the rear yard, and it would flow downhill,
Yes, yeah, they're all,
flowing downhill.
Which one is this one?
I think it's lot 2, there's some steep slopes over 30% there. Would that cause any issues regarding the placement of the house?
you know what, I'd probably slide that over to the south a little bit, but no, the house location will probably stay in that 30% location.
All right, and then just overall to Jeff's question, I'm much more in favor of the clustering plan. I would rather see that than the conventional one. And truthfully speaking, I don't think the conventional one would work given the amount of wetlands that there are on the site.
Other comments?
When you say you don't think it would work, the conventional plan with the, I'm not sure I understand that. If the conventional plan doesn't work because of the limitations for,
I mean, it would,
Wetlands, then-
everything's still proposed, everything's still compliant with zoning.
okay,
I guess a better way to phrase that would be there's a lot more land that wouldn't be developable per the lot
and,
due to the wetlands.
okay. I just wanted to clarify that,
Yeah,
because I
no,
think that's
thank
an
you for that.
important
I appreciate it.
distinction. And then the other thing is you're proposing 1,500-foot square houses with 4 bedrooms?
That's the footprint.
3,000.
You know,
So
so if
the-
you have a double story, you
Oh,
can
I
go up
see.
to 3,000, which all the single family homes we're doing now.
Thank you for the
are all
clarification.
around 1,800 to 2,200, it seems to be the new market.
This is the maximum footprint is what you're showing.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know if this is within our purview, but are you building full basements?
Not that far yet?
I'm just thinking with the wetland and the groundwater table, that could be a challenge for new homeowners.
Well, what we'll have to do when we design, when we actually do the full design and go preliminary, so we design our, you know, do our septic systems, do our full grading plans, one of the things we're gonna have to show are our footing drains. You know, to show that, our roof drains, show everything's draining, to make sure everything works. So if there are lots, like lot 1, I doubt we'll have a basement. Lot 7, I mean, I'm just looking at the yield plan, but.
Sure.
Lot 1 on either plan most likely will not have a basement because it's just a flat lot. The other lots, I'm just looking at them quickly, they look like they could certainly daylight a footing drain for a basement.
Yeah, I think Anthony's reminded me that we saw that issue with Cooper Street and Highview Avenue, which all of that is kind of near here. It's the same hill, I guess, but
It's up
But-
a bit.
also this has a lot of spaces to absorb some water. There's a lot of space here that's not paved and everything else. So that's nice. And I like the clustering of the driveways in both plans, which I know was already brought up, but just saying that for the record, that was a good idea.
Does anyone have any concerns about the yield plan? That 7 lots is reasonable for this property?
No.
All right, so it sounds like we're fairly agreed on that. So it comes down to an issue of if we feel that that's acceptable, then do we want to go ahead and move forward with one plan or the other?
So I maybe want to poll the board individually. I mean, I'm in favor of the cluster.
As am I.
Cluster?
Cluster.
Yeah, I thought the cluster looked nice. I thought both might be all right, but I prefer to guess if the cluster pushed to one.
All right, so yeah, that's I'm in agreement. We're fairly unanimous on that. Is that something we need to actually make a motion on? And
No, I think a polling is good enough at this
Fine.
point, yeah.
okay, so then I think we're agreed that we're going to move forward. Sorry, with the cluster plan. We'd already started to address the issue that you brought up in your memo about circulating for seeker, so we started that process.
One last comment.
Please.
And I know this is going to Orange County DPW. I don't know what your driveway specs are gonna be in the right-of-way portion for those joint driveways. but seeing that that would be a shared spec, perhaps you could include up a beefed up cross-section or a minimal cross-section for that area so that in the long run, those residents wouldn't have to worry about who's gonna maintain that driveway entrance.
I think the county's probably gonna require that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, they have a pretty beefy pavement spec in there right away.
Okay.
Even for individual driveways, but it'll be on the plan certainly, and, but I'm making a note of that.
Thank you.
Anything else we need to consider before we might, sorry, anything else we need to consider before we might consider, send this off to DPW?
Should we send it to the county planning as well? I don't believe, oh, we did that. Well, no,
Yeah.
we sent the lead agency notice of intent, but we didn't send a 239 referral. You think it's
Do
ready?
you want me to
Oh,
use the
'cause
set of
right.
plans that I got?
Can I send you new ones, because I'm just looking at it, and the site distances I printed out on the conventional plan, but I noticed the plan I gave you doesn't have them listed. I'd like to have
Yep.
those on there before they were sent
Okay,
out.
so when you send me the plans, put a note, Noreen, these are the ones to go.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good idea to send that now.
Yeah.
All right, so to Orange County, DPW,
In Orange County Planning
Planning.
Department.
Who sent to them again? Orange County Planning?
I don't think I went there. That was a response to the lead agency
Oh, okay,
notice of
gotcha,
intent.
gotcha. Yep, okay.
Should we discuss the bulk requirements proposed?
We can start to have that conversation, sure.
do you have comments from Mark that we need to go over?
I do, if you'd like to.
Please, let's move with that.
Understanding, okay, so he comments on the bulk table, values that we're gonna discuss likely after this. Next comment is about the tree inventory, which we kind of touched on, that Joe's gonna provide.
Yeah, we are preparing a tree
Yeah.
control plan.
We touched on the wetlands, and the, chapter 56 of the town code, deals with the preservation and protection of local wetlands, which may be required based on the layouts of the cluster and some of the lots. And we touched on the conservation easement, who that's gonna be, dedicated to. And again, on the discussion of the bulk tables and if the proposed values are acceptable. He also comments on some things that should be discussed. Results of the field review by the board members and of the conservation committee, and I don't know, did you guys already take a field visit of the site?
Yeah.
No? Some? Okay. Verification of owner to the rear and possible need for interconnection. I think that would be in the town, that owner in the town of Chester at 15-127.41. And actions, we already touched about the scenic road of Lakes Road. He talks about referrals to County Department of Planning. DOH will be required because of the major subdivision. And for the septics and wells, and for Orange County DPW. We previously noted that the clarification is needed with regard to contours and elevations. This information will be further reviewed as the plans move forward. That's all he's got. So
Okay.
touch on most of them.
So you started to mention about what you're thinking you might propose as a bulk table for us to
Yeah,
consider.
Yeah, we have it right on the cluster plan.
Just so you see the concept here, when you have a cluster, it's unrealistic to use the existing bulk table for the zoning district because they have no relationship to the size of the lots. By the same token, you don't want it to be a free-for-all that allows anybody to extend their house and add a room to the side or the rear or the front that would disturb the look and feel of the subdivision. So generally, you set bulk table that's specific for this plan, and any incursion into that area would require a variance. It's logical to say where these houses are built, which is the maximum they're permitted to build, use those proposed setbacks as the bulk table restrictions for the lot, meaning the houses cannot be built any larger than they are without a variance. And that's what Joe has proposed here.
Yeah, right, the lots are 100-foot wide, we have 15-foot side yards, so we have 70 foot to play with, so so if you have a 50-foot wide house, you you got room to, slide it one way or the other, without it being, dead nut on. So,
Makes sense.
And as I said, the front yard and the rear yards, we actually maintained the same setbacks as the
Code
the
requires,
code.
So you're saying the side yard is really the only,
Lot width and side yard.
that, okay,
And
that's
lot
different.
size, yeah.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I should have thought of this already. Before we just continue with that conversation, Ward, do you know, did yourself or anyone from the Conservation Committee have a chance to go out to the site, and are there any comments from the committee?
Not that I know of, no one, I don't think we had a copy of the plans.
I thought I gave them to you at the last meeting.
Give me a copy of the plans of the ones on Circle Drive.
Pass those to Ward. You can have that set.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Ward. Okay, so then, sorry, back to the discussion of bulk requirements. Anyone have any comments about that? Questions? Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, we're not talking about a major variation from what would have been required anyway. And, I think with some of the benefits of the easement and that kind of thing, it certainly sounds reasonable to me. So that would be something we'd adopt, Mike, correct?
Yeah, it'll be shown on the plans, and in the resolution, we'll have a condition that imposes that as the bulk table applicable to these lots.
Okay, that sounds good. Anything else we can try and accomplish for you tonight, John?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. I think we got some
Thank you
good
very
stuff.
much for your time.
All right,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. The next application we're going to be looking at is DG Management. If everyone can take a minute to switch over to that set of plans.
I'll just look on with you. I remember this one.
Okay, if everyone's ready. John? Yes? Want to bring us, give us a little overview of where we're at and
Sure.
what we're looking to do tonight.
Good evening, John Queen from Light and Tully for the record. We're before you tonight again with the proposal for subdivision of property, 9.5 acres, located off of, frontage is off of Alico Terrace. However, we have access coming in from Scunnamunk Road. We've been here several times at this layout, I think most recently the last month. We're proposing we have a conventional layout of 16 lots, single-family lots, that comes from access from Scunnamunk Road up through what is a proposed village temporary dead-end street. We would take that temporary dead-end, convert it to a through road to our property. And the conventional layout has two basic cul-de-sacs coming off that with lots that go around that cul-de-sac. Lot number one, which is all the way on the right side of your map, that would have access from Scunnamunk Road directly from the driveway. That's provided through a 50-foot wide access easement that was done in the past as part of previous subdivisions. And then lot number 10, which is over in the upper left-hand corner of the map, would derive its access directly from Alico Terrace. When we were last before the board, there were some comments and questions about lot number 10. So we did a basic, quick site plan to prove that it's a buildable lot. We could get a driveway in there that meets the town specifications and a house. And that's kind of where I left it off at this point. But I'd like to just go with the board tonight is the conventional layout and try to, if the board so chooses, to determine that 16 is our number. We did a cluster layout. I didn't revise that yet until I'm sure about, you know, the number of lots that we're looking at. But the basic cluster layout came in, did a much shorter cul-de-sac, one cul-de-sac bulb, and then it had the lots clustered around that. So that's the direction we'll be looking at. Before I really do a lot more work on the cluster plan, I just want to get the number of lots down.
Right, and that's where I remember us laying, finishing up as well, leaving off. Some comments from our engineer first before we open discussion?
Sure. So the first one is just a status update of the Village of Monroe application for the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, currently, the plan has received preliminary approval,
Okay.
and they are doing their outside agency, referral.
Okay. Excuse me while I walk right. The next is the further review of the yield plan to include the rough grading to verify reasonable constructability. We reviewed it, however, the proposed topography only goes to the right-of-way line, and the proposed topography wasn't tied into the existing, so we couldn't verify whether or not grading was necessary outside of the, you know, the two lots that are, or the one lot in the town and the one lot in the village, whether or not there's necessary grading outside of those lots. Which, on the, for the yield plan, the second sheet.
Yep.
The yield, or I'm sorry, the grading only goes to the, actually only to the edge of pavement. It didn't tie into the existing grades?
Well, yeah, it didn't. What it did was we did a road profile, and then I did profiles of each driveway, just to prove that the road was.
Right, but we couldn't verify whether or not there was grading needed off-site.
Okay. This is the conversation we've had, before.
Okay.
Basically what it worked out to be is we were talking about this at technical workshops, not to have to do a complete grading plan, just to prove that, one, we could develop a road that would meet the town spec
Mm-hmm.
or grade, and then
Okay.
just show driveway access to the proposed lots.
Okay.
So that's,
I'll talk to Mark about that. I'm just concerned that, you know, sure, we could show the road with the correct slopes and whatnot, but, would that require grading off-site?
yeah, and I understand what you're saying. I don't think it would, because we would basically, once we prove access to the lot, then the house itself would conform to that. I mean,
Okay.
if Mark or you want a little more, I guess.
Excuse me, which lots are you looking at?
Well, we're actually looking at the road profiles.
Oh.
The proposed grading on the second sheet?
Furthest right cul-de-sac here, right?
Well, the whole road, essentially.
Yeah.
See, the proposed topography only runs to the extent of the proposed road.
Right.
So I'm concerned that maybe there could be some required grading into you know, the adjacent lots not owned by the applicant.
Would it be possible to analyze maybe the two most extreme lots in terms of what the proposed road grading is and the grading onto those lots, so that we can see that it would work for an extreme situation?
I could I'll grade out the whole, subdivision, that's fine. I think it's just easier.
Thanks.
All right. Driveway serving lot 1 accesses over previously delineated road reservation. Planning board requested more information regarding history of this matter. This may need to be constructed to private road standards.
Okay.
I don't know if that was previously discussed.
Yeah, I think it was discussed at the last meeting that, that it met the requirements based on the previous subdivision map that was.
Oh, this is the long way out to the,
Yeah.
yeah. John has shown me that there was in fact a file map where that roadway was shown. Although it is not improved in any fashion, it is a qualifying roadway. Remember, 280A has two provisions. One, the road has to be a qualifying roadway, which is either an existing state, town, or village street, or a access way shown on a file map. This is. So the second requirement would be that to be approvable, it would have to be built to the town road specification, which is doable.
private.
I'm sorry, the private road specification, which is simply a matter of spending money, but there's no reason why it couldn't be done.
Mm-hmm.
So it does not need 280A relief. It would satisfy the requirement if it was
Okay.
built to that spec.
Okay. Identification of shallow bedrock areas which would most impact grading and possibly preclude the development. I think that was discussed at length last meeting, right?
I know that was one of the concerns that we brought up in relation to the proposed dwelling on Lot 10.
Okay. Next, evaluation of the maximum cul-de-sac length, roadway length as town road, private road not possible based on lot count. Waiver may be required. I think that's in reference to the cul-de-sac to the right, because it's such a short cul-de-sac, whether or not that would be, allowed, or I guess wanted by the town highway department. Next, the tree inventory or limit of wooded area was to be delineated. From this, an evaluation is to be made regarding the impacts of the cluster development. How can clearing be limited? Replanting plan is anticipated. And then concern with regard to visibility of development from Route 208. Regarding the conceptual review, we have following initial comments. First is this plan includes a concept rough grading plan. Significant cuts and fills would be needed to accomplish the development. However, the development is technically feasible as shown. I think that's still to be seen because of the, the grading, but the next is a plan bulk table is set up for both gross and net lot areas. However, the table has not correctly, is not correctly or completely filled out. Some lots meet the absolute minimum requirements with no surveyed meets and bounds indicated. Eventually, grades, meets and bounds, drainage, etc. will need to be coordinated between the road proposed for this application. So that's all I've got.
Questions? Since our meeting on the 11th, having taken a look at this again, one of the things I'm wondering is, and Sean brings up the concern about this small bulb cul-de-sac, would that possibly be conforming? Would that need a waiver? Is that necessary? Can the lots, could that be more of a corner or a curve in the road and the lots just extended out to meet that? Would that be feasible? I mean, it would mean changing obviously the geography of the driveways and.
Yeah, at that point, I think you'd lose some width on a lot. I don't think you'd be able to get the lot width on the lots there.
That's what I was wondering. Okay.
Probably lose two or three, lot 2 or 3.
And I don't know if the cul-de-sac length applies to the shorter one as much as the longer one.
Okay.
And since this is our.
No, I think it is the shorter one because really,
Maximum length?
Last meeting, I brought up the maximum length of a cul-de-sac.
maximum, but Mark always has concern about minimum length because the only reason why you have that small turnaround is so you can get an extra lot out of it. So is
Sure, yeah, I don't recall discussing that, but I think the point is valid as well.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if the code actually specifies a minimum.
No, it does have a maximum, but it's waivable in the planning board's determination.
And since this
Do you know what
property,
the
this
maximum
property's
is?
worked.
We looked it up then, I thought it was 600 feet.
Securing that access at the location that we have proposed it at through the village, getting that road, because we've had a lot of issues with the 50-foot wide easement that was set for access to this property. And as you know, there's a subdivision next door to this, and the two were at odds with each other, so this applicant went ahead and got that other access point where we show now. So it's really our only point to get into the property with a municipal road, so that's why we'd be looking for that waiver to be granted. There's no other usable frontage for that.
Could we show it to the highway department or something? Because I don't know how you snowplow a cul-de-sac and how many driveways or how much room you need between them, or I don't know if that was thought of when you were drawing it up or not. I
No,
don't
I
know.
mean, it's a standard town spec cul-de-sac. It's
Is it?
just-
Okay.
It's just very short.
All right. Maybe it's not an issue. I don't know. If you're trying to put the snow someplace, you could just gotta have empty space between the driveways. It looks like there's enough, I guess, from there. I mean, you have right here,
Yeah, I mean, it's.
and right there, and
you
right
know,
there,
the-
but I'm
if-
just,
We could always flip the driveway on lot 3 to be on the other side, and then you'd have the area between lots 2 and 3 to plow the snow.
I see what you mean. Yeah, okay.
So since our meeting on the 11th, and I'm sorry because I didn't have a chance to review the earlier plan, was the driveway that's proposed here reconfigured on lot 10?
Yes.
It was.
It's reconfigured to meet the town spec for slopes, maximum 10%. Basically, the concern of the board was that you couldn't build there, it wasn't a buildable lot. So we've designed it now that if someone were, they could build that, if they so choose, and that driveway would meet the town spec.
Okay, so explain something to me for my clarification. Towards the bottom of the driveway, it runs down what is an area that's in gray, so that delineates something that's greater than 30% in
Correct.
slope. So how does that meet the town spec of no more than 10%?
Because the final grade will be 10%. That's why the driveway is like serpentine.
Mm-hmm.
So you're increasing the length to get higher, get more slope. So you can go through an area of steep slope, you're gonna have a cut, but the final driveway grade will be 10%.
Okay.
I see. So it'd be 30% if you were sledding down it straight, but it's 10% because you
10%
wind.
if you follow the paved path.
Okay.
I think we're back in the original conversation of how much detailed design do we put into the conventional to prove the number of lots. I could look at this 7 different ways and do the design 7 different ways, but at some point it comes to the instance where it's how much more effort do I put in to prove these lots versus concentrating on the final ultimate plan.
Do you think in the final plan that home would be there? Is that
No.
number 10
Well,
or is that no?
Because we would like to do the cluster, and we had given you a cluster at the last meeting.
Oh, okay.
And that basically takes all the lots, centers them around one cul-de-sac. And it gets rid of the short cul-de-sac, lot 10 comes all the way in. And that was.
Right, I get it. So this is just for the number of lots.
Right.
Yep.
Correct.
Other questions or comments?
Still not clear on the length of the cul-de-sac. I know you
Look
explained
it
that,
up
but
here now, but,
what was the situation with the previous adjacent lot owner that they didn't allow for room for
They
extension?
have a proposed road that comes out pretty much right next to where that access easement is that we're showing. And then the 2 applicants got together, they couldn't come to an agreement, the one letting one use the other, puts crossover lots. So basically, our applicant said, okay, I'm gonna go in a different direction, and then secured the access through the village.
Where would that road have been?
Which
Are
road?
we talking about the now formerly Feder property?
We're talking about now and formerly D'Ambrosio
Where is that one?
is.
Oh, I
Just
see.
slightly to the north.
I see.
Yes.
Yep.
That's the one that has the loop, almost like the lollipop looking layout. It's main road.
D'Ambrosio, if you remember, is the, where we took the group site visit to,
Yes.
where is currently proposed 6 units. Yeah.
Has a P-shaped road, right?
Right.
That's right. And that was basically adjacent, it's adjacent to what we're proposing as the Lot 1 driveway.
All right, yeah, so it comes here.
Okay, maximum length of a cul-de-sac is 500 feet.
So if you had the D'Ambrosio lot, you wouldn't need you would have a through street through better? Is that how you would have gotten around the 700-foot limitation?
No, we would have still had that limitation if we went to D'Ambrosio. Because D'Ambrosio comes up, it has, I think, a 300-foot stretch and then the circular, I'll call it, roadway. So off that 300 feet, there was a proposal to connect and then come across into this property, basically through lot number 1 on an angle. D'Ambrosio would not allow that. So we would have had a cul-de-sac issue in any scenario. Even if we were to use the 50-foot wide access easement that was deemed for this property, that would be a cul-de-sac coming up, and it'd be longer than 500 feet, so.
And so on this proposed road, what's the length of the proposal?
The proposed road from the village property line to the longest point
Yeah.
is 531 feet. And then you would add the length from the village, so you're probably looking at close to 8, I would guess, in all total from Scunnamunk to the end.
So I'm not understanding how that would justify the waiver. What is that, why would that be a basis for having a waiver?
Because there's no other access to this property. So even if we were to build on the access that was previously subdivided through the existing 50-foot wide access easement, going up to lot 1.
Couldn't you
we
build
would
a
still
through
have a
road
cul-de-sac.
from the village through lot 10?
We couldn't build that. That's just not feasible slope-wise. That's why lot 10 has the serpentine driveway, comes up to a house, then there's grading, then there's a proposed wall, and then you hop up to the top of the hill where the cul-de-sac is. I wouldn't be able to make that grade change with a town road coming down.
What about through lot 1 where the driveway on the proposed dwelling is?
Yeah, but you'd still have the cul-de-sac longer than 500 feet. By the time you got to lot number 1.
It'd be longer than what he's proposing now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so what you're saying is net it would be longer.
Correct.
And this proposal was there to deal with a 2-lot subdivision in the village, if I remember correctly, anyway.
Which proposal?
For the,
For the temporary,
I guess,
All the village
for
cul-de-sacs.
the portion that's gonna go through the village
Yes.
out to Scunnamunk.
Correct.
They were doing that anyway, or at least they were considering that anyway.
Yes.
And there's a preliminary approval there,
Yes,
as opposed to starting from scratch out through.
yeah.
This is where Village
That's
of
right.
Patriot, Village of
Yeah.
Monroe.
Monroe.
Also, pulling out on the Scunnamunk there is pretty hairy anyway. When we did it from the D'Ambrosio property, it was pretty awful.
Yeah, you're approaching that sharp bend.
Yeah, and they're moving pretty quick, and you can't see very far. So, I mean, this is probably a better
Look, honestly,
access
that's
anyway.
that's true along a lot of Scunnamunk, but yeah, I tend to agree with you. I feel that out through the proposed road is a better access than what would be the one out through lot 1, sort of parallel to the road that's going to come out to D'Ambrosio property.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at the end, after going through a lot of it, at the end, I think that is the best access for this property.
Anthony, more questions?
No.
Okay,
Mike, I have a question.
please.
How much, so when we approve the conventional plan or assign that as the yield, do we have to consider the cul-de-sac length to be part of that, or do we have to approve a zoning and road spec compliant drawing?
Again, it has to be approvable, but
Okay.
as we talked about before with the wetland buffer permit, that is permitted. You can get a permit to do it. Here, though it exceeds the cul-de-sac length restriction, that is waivable by the planning board upon circumstances you feel appropriate. So if it is your conclusion that this land could not have been developed in an approvable fashion in any way other than to grant that cul-de-sac length waiver, then even though you're not necessarily granting it, you're saying that subdivision was in fact approvable and its yield count can then move on to a cluster layout.
Okay.
I
So,
kind of gave you a letter outlining the, the gray areas of what does an approvable subdivision mean, and there's no hard and fast definition. It's what you think is reasonably justified using common sense.
When it,
So what you're saying that if we didn't have a waiver and they were limited to the 6 foot 100 length, and
They
that
couldn't
caused
develop.
them to develop only 3 lots as opposed to 17 lots, that,
That might be your yield count if that was your conclusion.
Okay.
But I think you have granted cul-de-sac blank waivers in the past, so it's a question of whether you would have in this certain situation.
well,
So-
and the other thing is, we got a comment that, anything is buildable in rock. If you wanted to blast and chip your way through to make grades meet, but when we get to lot 10, which is very steep, that's not reasonable to
Yeah.
blast because it's so steep and would require a deep cut that may extend beyond the
Yep.
boundaries.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's your judgment call as to whether or not you think this would have been approved.
all right, just for my clarification, so because we do have this waiver, and lot 10 has been proven to be buildable, this is in theory the yield. Am I
If
understanding
you
that
find
right?
that the conventional plan is an approvable plan, you take the number of lots it shows, that's your yield count, and you throw it away and start over, which is my pet peeve about our cluster approach. If you find that it is not approvable because you would not have granted that cul-de-sac waiver, then you need to see and evaluate a conventional plan that would in fact be approvable by you. But there's no absolute prohibition on this subdivision. It's within the realm of what you could waive.
and in determining yield count, if it's more, it sounds like, would we consider a waiver
Yeah,
on a
that to me
cul-de-sac
is the
this thing?
question.
We're not committing to
Yeah, it's not
granting a
approved,
waiver. It's not
right.
it's
So
not an
there's
approval. It's not
approvable.
any of those things. It's would we take that under consideration? So I think that sort of needs to be the conversation there.
And if I could just add to that.
Please.
Part of the approved subdivision that created this lot to only have that access easement cut off its other potential access from, I believe it's Jane Court. So what happened was, there's that cul-de-sac that comes off of Arico. That subdivision created those lots off of Jane Court that basically cut this piece off. And then they left that 50-foot access easement going out. So right off the bat, I'm losing 300 to 400 feet of cul-de-sac length because of that subdivision that was approved. I don't know, I don't see why this applicant should be punished for something that happened back then. He can only get maybe 100 feet into his property. It's something that I just wish the board would take that into
Oh,
consideration.
sorry, where was the Jane Court? Is that here?
What created this?
Or is
If
it-
you consider, if you continue along Arico Terrace, which dead ends out at the highway on-ramp for 17 East, Jane was opened up between two houses.
That's correct.
And runs
Oh,
right here. So then you have these 3 properties, but this dead ends as well in a small cul-de-sac.
Yeah,
Um,
this was all one property.
Oh, okay, I see.
And they subdivided this into 4 lots, this being the 4th lot. And when they did that, they created the access out this way.
And they cut off any access north
That's right.
of you, is where you're pointing. Did you guys get to see this, or?
I'm looking at it.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, no, I see
Maybe-
what you're saying.
Yeah, so these 3 lots here off Jane Court were created with this lot as part of a subdivision back in 2004.
Yeah, you want to show John too, yeah.
Okay, and that will,
effectively cut off all access.
from the north,
potential
got it.
from the north.
All right.
The other thing is, Mike, were you starting to say that, has the planning board approved long cul-de-sacs in the past? I mean, if we're, I know we're newer as membership, not that we're completely beholden to what has been approved in the past, but you like to have some consistency.
But it's directional for yield count, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You have granted cul-de-sac waivers in the past. Most of them were granted where an opportunity was presented to allow a connection in the future to undeveloped lands. But you have had several others, there's some down on the southern part of the town, where to get to the lots, and they were relatively, they weren't 50 lot subdivisions, they were, 5 to 10 lot type subdivisions. There was a recognition that you needed a long road to get there. There's no other way to develop it. There was no potential that you could reach from anywhere else. And the property owner owned a lot of land. So if you didn't grant the waiver, they'd only be permitted to use a relatively small amount in the front. So you have exercised that flexibility for reasons like that. I can't tell you whether you should or shouldn't here, but I can tell you in the years I've represented the board, you have granted them in limited circumstances. The two that I can think of is where it would be impossible to utilize some of the full land holdings, and in those cases where there's a possibility of future connection, which is a goal of your subdivision regulations that would be disallowed if you didn't grant the cul-de-sac waiver.
Okay, thanks.
Other comments?
Would the history be relevant to the context of subdividing that property off of, was it Jane Court? I mean, was the limiting this area for development part of that consideration?
I can't say I would remember. We'd have to look at that file and see.
Because you have the 150-foot O&R easement, you have a lot of rock there and limited access, and now we would have to consider a waiver to extend not just 700 feet, but I guess it's 1,500 feet?
No, it's about 800 total,
Oh, 800?
from Scunnamunk to the farthest point.
Oh, okay.
And if you were to come up that access easement that was provided, 500 feet would just get you to the property line.
I see.
One of the things, as far as the limitations in getting into this site, we keep talking about this property as fronting on Orico Terrace, and it does, but it fronts with a cliff on Orico Terrace. I mean, it truly, I gotta be honest, I'm skeptical even with the changes about Lot 10, but that being said, there's certainly no road access out that way. It's not that the applicant can come to us and say, well, I could put in access off of Orico Terrace and do another cul-de-sac and get that 500 feet from Orico.
Well, I kind of feel like we have a really difficult site to develop, and we're asking for two considerations. One, or a few considerations.
Mm-hmm.
One is extending the waiver, and also for the length. We have an unusual short cul-de-sac with a stub, and we have significant potential rock grading. I think those are significant obstacles to overcome, and consider the proposed 17 lots. Is that what we're at? 16. So I would have to think about that.
But I think the rock grading is a separate issue from determining the
I'm not so sure about that. And when it comes to our engineer's comment about shallow bedrock in the area, that exists. The question is how much. But because this is for the town in such a village area and on one of our smaller lot zoned areas, there are already a lot of existing properties in the area that are developed, and to say, well, I can just get rid of the bedrock. If there are areas of this property that are just too close to developed properties to blast bedrock out. That's going to be part of the issue, because I know that was an issue historically in some of the work that was done in the existing homes there. So where things weren't able to be done because they were just too close to existing properties to blast the bedrock out.
But I'm confused on how that relates to the yield count meeting the zoning.
Because when it comes to yield count, I guess it's the conceivability of, would we approve this? Not to get it to final approval or even preliminary approval, but is this conceptually approvable? And
that's where we're struggling at, and that's
right.
And if we're coming down that road, I would put a lot more time and effort into developing the plan in more greater detail, but like it was said, we're just gonna confirm this, crumple it up and
Throw it
put
away.
to the side, so
Yeah.
that's the struggle we're at.
Yeah, in my opinion, again, I have less of a concern with saying conceptually, sure, we might approve a waiver on the length of the cul-de-sac, and that's, you know, certainly considerable. Again, the lot 10 thing, I have reservations there, and, you know, I understand the question about this small bulb cul-de-sac and whether that would truly be allowable or not, and, you know, maybe we do have to consult our highway department just to find out.
Is
But
there- is
what-
there-
what other concerns does the board have?
I've-
Or are those the concerns that the board has, or they're, you know?
Is the, I don't know if this is gonna make exact sense, but a possible waiver for the cul-de-sac length, you would do, pretend it was the final plan for a minute, you would do it for the actual plan being built. Does that same concept apply to the plan where you're just trying to get the, lot count?
The yield?
Yeah.
I think they're essentially the same, but I think there's a recognition that it is not appropriate to require a full final level detail to be shown. You want to have enough that you can get a handle on whether this is a project that you likely would have approved in that form. And I tried to give you the flavor of that in that letter. If this is not a case where you would, under any circumstances, grant that cul-de-sac waiver, then it is not an approvable plan, and you have to back off. If it's likely that you would have granted that, not that you are in fact granting it, but it is approvable in ways that make sense, then you would, in fact, use that conventional plan, take that yield, and move on with the cluster. It's a judgment call.
Anyone else?
Just wondering if you could have looped in the two access roads off of Scunnamunk, the one through lot, the one all the way to the right,
Through lot one, you mean?
Yeah.
All right.
through lot one. That would eliminate the 600-foot cul-de-sac requirement, wouldn't it?
I would still be over with the other one. And then I'd have the issue with the two roads being next to each other on Scunnamunk. But I guess we would go back to cluster, and then I guess we would
Well,
go back to
maybe
the cluster with the
the
cul-de-sac.
maybe the existing house would want to change their driveway and just connect it to the new road
Which existing house?
next to lot one. I'm not sure what you're saying about the two road issue.
Oh, I mean, I could look at looping it through, but then I have to, well, then you would have two proposed roads, but in the end, if that wasn't what the cluster plan was going to look like, if it wasn't contingent on having the loop road on the cluster plan, that would work. But if you're contingent on having the loop road to cut the cul-de-sac lane on the cluster plan, that doesn't work because we wouldn't be able to build that road at that location. If that makes any sense at all. Cause if we go back to the cluster plan, we're still gonna have the length of cul-de-sac, we're back to the same waiver per se. And if you're gonna, on the yield plan, show this loop, just to say we don't need the waiver on the yield plan, but we're gonna need the waiver on the cluster plan, because I can't build the loop on the cluster plan.
I see.
Stuck either way.
I guess I'm just stating the obvious for the record, but it feels a little crowded. But it's a yield plan. I guess you're supposed to put in as many lots as you could possibly fit in that space, and that includes the creativity in the small first cul-de-sac here on the right. So it looks bunched up, but that's, I guess, what you're supposed to do with a yield, is try and get as many lots in there for the greatest level of permission, right?
If you're the developer, of course.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it meets all the bulk requirements, they all have the net area 10,000 square feet, they meet the lot width and the setbacks, and So,
They do meet the requirement. If it didn't, there'd be 27 in here instead. So it could be worse, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, if that helps.
Other opinions?
I think barring the review of, or any objections to the smaller cul-de-sac or the short bulb, I think this board would entertain the cul-de-sac waiver, therefore making this the yield.
Sorry, what you're saying?
I'm saying if no one objects to that small bulb on
Uh,
the right side, I think this board would grant the cul-de-sac waiver. So
The maximum, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think 16's your number.
yeah, I think I'm tending to agree with that too. I guess. If
Other comments? I mean, I gotta say, I'm comfortable with conceivable ability of the waiver. You know, I happen to agree with John's comment about this is the most intelligent way to get into this development. It's really the maybe only intelligent way to get into this area to develop it at all. So for that reason, we'd almost have to at least consider the waiver. So if we consider it, then maybe consider it.
John, what's the total length of the cul-de-sac, did you say? 531 feet plus or minus?
ours on just our property, but if you add the village piece, I think you end up from Skyline, you end up closer to 80.
Would that affect, do you think, with the code? Because technically it's just the piece in the town, right?
No, I think it would include the whole road.
The whole road?
And you
The
said
idea is
the
fire
maximum
protection
is
and
600?
emergency.
Historically, though, we've approved
Or
longer.
500?
I think it was 5.
I don't know.
500, I believe.
Yeah.
5.
Also, it's necessary, just if we were approving the cul-de-sac, it's necessary due to no fault of the developer. There's a cliff over here on Orico Terrace, and the guy to the north kind of cut out any chance to build out that direction. And that's why, you know, it's not like he planned to do this cul-de-sac. He was stuck doing, building last in the area, I guess.
Well, and honestly, from the scale of the map, the way the driveway, into the proposed lot 1 looks, it looks like it would be longer to come in from that direction all the way out to where we're proposing anyway.
Yeah, it would be
So
worse
it'd
anyway.
That much more of a waiver.
Yeah.
I mean, again, the double bulb cul-de-sac looks a little awkward to me, but I'm not tremendously bothered by that. I don't know that we would approve lot 10. I think that the yield it might be 15, but again, that's my opinion. I just don't know that we would ever get to a point of real comfortable with that lot for buildability.
Any particular,
Um,
because if you want, I can take a much closer look at it and really detail it up if you had a particular concern.
I think you might be trying to say, like, if you're saying meeting the requirements for the yield, that's one conversation. If we were talking about in real life building that serpentine driveway up to that house to go on Orico, it might seem different in reality, right? I mean, it's
No one wants to shovel that.
it's not even necessarily again the serpentineness of the driveway. I'm just having walked through there. The slopes just seem near especially towards the bottom of the driveway, seem real difficult to get up with a car, or real difficult to clear out. And again, maybe that's.
And
Maybe-
your
maybe
driveway
that-
may
maybe-
follow the contour, but you're gonna have a heck of a cliff there. God forbid there's ice there that guy.
Look. In all fairness, in reference to the subdivision off of Jane, those driveways are fairly serpentine too, but it's a shallower part of the hill. But things are buildable. Right? I get that. That's just one I just don't necessarily see. But again, that's my opinion based on what I've observed. Not as a builder, but as a layman. Other comments?
I would guess I was tempted to ask Mike if the contours of Lot 10 are something we'd consider on the yield plan, but I think you're going to tell me,
Yeah,
is it
yes.
approvable, I
Yeah,
guess.
I mean, it is a
concept.
judgment call,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
whether it's possible,
So you were getting that before. I know
It's
it keeps
whether
going
it's-
around, yeah.
approvable. And
Yeah.
that's somewhere between possible and approved. So, but, you know, you know,
Yeah.
as I mentioned in the letter, common sense is a piece of it. That, you know, you look at it realistically. Is this the kind of a plan that if we weren't talking cluster, and we're talking this is what they want to build, is this the sort of thing that you would like to approve?
So what's our next step, Mike?
Well, I think John's at the point where he wants to know what his conventional approval is, how many lots it is, so we can get to work on the cluster. If you need more information, and as I pointed out in the letter, one of the things you can require is a higher level of detail for this project than you might, in a more mundane layout. So if you want more detail, John's offered to provide some. If you give him some guidance, he'll do that and see whether or not that moves it to the point that you can decide it is or is not approvable.
So let's start with that concept. Does anyone feel that they need more level of detail, and if so, what, to make a decision on this?
If I could just offer two.
Please.
Please, yeah.
I would, to address Sean's comment, I will do some additional grading, hook everything in, so to make sure that we're not gonna go off the property boundaries for that. And two, if you'd like, I'll meet with the highway superintendent and go over that short cul-de-sac with him. That's,
I think most are okay. I don't know, do you guys want to have the highway super take a look at the short
Yes.
bulb, or? Yeah,
I think, yeah.
okay.
I think those two things would build in a greater degree of comfort for the board
Yeah,
before we
we could get
move
those.
forward.
I don't know about asking the highway superintendent on that. I kind of feel like we're putting him in a position to make a decision for the planning board. And I'm not comfortable with the second bulb and making a waiver. I think there are a lot of extreme situations on this property. I wouldn't be prepared to approve 16 lots on a conventional plan, and that's my judgment.
What would you like to see in addition to what we've seen so far to make a decision one way or the other?
Two things. One
Thanks.
is, on lot 10, even though you show a serpentine driveway with reasonable, or, slopes that are within 10% less, I still think that there's plenty of grading there that, I wouldn't feel safe going up and down that driveway if it was 12 foot wide and I was going to have a cliff, either a guardrail or a 14 or 16 foot wide driveway. That would ease some of my concern. And then the other thing would be to eliminate the bulb, the short bulb.
Again, I don't see what the concern of the short cul-de-sac is. What is the,
I think it's.
Because now we have two cul-de-sacs, one we're asking for a waiver and one we're asking because it's a short bulb, and we're asking for two cul-de-sacs on a dead-end street that are, I don't think are
because
normal.
essentially, just because it's a short cul-de-sac or a short bulb, it doesn't mean it. It meets the criteria of the town code. So you come to a stop, you make a right, you go into a short cul-de-sac. You make it the left, you go on the longer cul-de-sac. I'm just failing to see what the issue is of the short cul-de-sac.
Would that be how it worked? Where there'd be a stop sign at the
Yeah, so
What-
basically the
at
village.
the offset
village-
T, so to speak?
Yeah, the village cul-de-sac would go away. So
Right. That would be
that becomes a straight road. You'd come up to a stop sign at RT, and then you'd make a right, you'd go into the short cul-de-sac, or you'd make the left and go down to the left cul-de-sac.
And there's,
And who would have the right of way between the small cul-de-sac and the large cul-de-sac?
You, to be honest with you, you'd probably do a three-way stop,
Oh, okay.
all three directions.
there's so little traffic anyway, probably. I mean, this side only has two driveways, literally, right? I mean, I guess I'm the one who brought up the snow in the first place, but there has to be room to put the snow if there's only two driveways, I guess. It's just that it's,
Right. I think the concern with the short cul-de-sac is for one additional lot, the maintenance cost and eventual replacement costs of the cul-de-sac for one additional taxpayer, you know, is a lot more, rather than if you just had that turn. It's a lot of additional pavement and improvements needed.
I would wholeheartedly agree with you,
Yeah.
except it's for purposes of the use.
It's purposes of the-
know,
yeah,
that's,
exactly.
I think that's the only concern of the short cul-de-sac, you know.
That's what, yeah, that's what I mean, so effectively, you know, it meets the town criteria for the road and.
Right.
Well,
I
there's many
agree with that.
definitions for a road, I mean, you don't even have a road yet, you just have a cul-de-sac, really.
Well, it's a continuation.
It is creative to squeeze that extra house in there with the small cul-de-sac.
Oh, of
But
course.
like, yes, and that was the purpose of it, because it is a yield drawing. So I get that. It's, it
I can
wouldn't,
see if I didn't meet the minimum, you know, radius, or it didn't meet the turnings, or it didn't provide the
Right.
50-foot right-of-way, but it meets all of that.
yeah, no, it's asked and answered, I guess. Darn it.
Well, could you make that radius that goes to the left go through your stormwater management area, so you would have more of a road to the cul-de-sac and less of a bulb?
Yeah, I could, because if I soften that way, then I would just realign the road coming into that T, and I'd make the stormwater management area on the right slightly larger. So yeah, that could be accomplished. Again, you're into the finer.
Yeah.
And I know we are, but, and only, sorry, but just because it inspired as a question. In the cluster plan, because I don't have it in front of me, although the lots are different, the road arrangement is sort of similar.
Generally.
Generally.
I don't remember the
Basically,
cluster
it
plan
comes
either.
up, and then we go to the left, and it's an arc to the left.
So it's essentially the long cul-de-sac without the bulb.
The long.
I guess what I'm trying to get.
Oh, with the bulb?
It still ends in a cul-de-sac.
No, I
No,
mean the
but
short
the-
bulb.
Yeah, I have it here. That's what.
Yeah.
Okay, so it hooks. It just more hooks off. to
That's
the
right.
left.
I remember
And
this now.
it's in a-
Okay.
Vanna.
So yeah, that's.
Thank you for the reminder, John.
Yeah. So this does eliminate some of those detail concerns we were getting into.
And
Yeah.
it gets to the more sweeping angle. It's a little bit shorter than what we have here, but you're still gonna be longer than the 500.
Any other issues we'd like to see John address in addition to the couple that he said he would work on for us? So we can come to a decision on this. And
Do you not want me to go to DPW or?
I mean, you know, that was just my opinion. You know, if it came down to it that we're gonna build out a conventional plan, and I want to know from the highway department, would you rather have, or that person have, that configuration of the T or a short bulb? I think, you know, that would be more appropriate,
Okay.
but that's my opinion.
Any others?
So with regards to lot one with the driveway, you'll be able to provide a reasonable possible grading plan, so even though you have a serpentine driveway, you could show that it's.
Lot 10.
Lot 10.
Yeah, I mean, we have the grading plan there doesn't drop off the cliff, but we'll refine it, we'll zoom in on it a little bit better. So as you're coming up the driveway, you're basically down to 4-to-1 slopes off the driveway. And as you're going up, that's what you meet 4-to-1, but I'll detail it up a little bit better for you. I could always add guide rail or whatever else that we need.
And nobody, even though we have a limitation on the length of a cul-de-sac to be 500 feet, nobody has an issue on having a length of a driveway for 800 feet or whatever that is.
Well, technically, I believe that's a private road
Yeah.
for lot one. You're referring to?
That's okay.
No, I think he's referring to 10.
No, one.
No, on one.
Goes back to
no.
1?
Yeah.
So it's a private road to the property line?
That's the way I understand that. That was
Yeah.
from a previous application and subsequent approval?
Yeah, recognize the purpose of the cul-de-sac length waiver, as it has been discussed by the board in the past, is the difficulties that are presented when you have fire protection, emergency services, if something happens and you can't get there. When you're talking about multiple homes, that's a real public safety issue. If it's a single home, it probably isn't. But the cul-de-sac length would. It's a tomahawk, it's not a cul-de-sac, but I think the concept is that overly long roads are not preferred in the subdivision regulations, and you have to affirmatively waive them, and they're not automatically permitted.
From what John showed us with the, reminding us what the cluster plan would look like in proposal, either way, we're looking at having to consider a road waiver. If ultimately, once we've chosen one plan or the other to go with, if we don't approve the waiver, that's gonna markedly change the look of how this is developed anyway. So that decision, we still have the option to make that decision. We're not taking it away one way or the other. The applicant, I think, is being realistic and telling us the only way I can really develop this in any sort of reasonable way is for you to consider a waiver. You know, I'm fairly landlocked by geography and by existing development. Am I?
You're doing better than me.
Flattery would get you? Well, maybe. I'm honest. Other things we'd like John to look at before we make a final decision on this?
Maybe just a comment that maybe it doesn't really apply to the yield plan. When we look at the actual plan there with the multi-family homes, whether one of them has 3 or 2 is really a minor difference. And I think with this plan, the real concern was really only with lot 1 and
Lot 10?
Lot 10. I apologize. I'm doing it now.
Well, the other thing is Mark had recommended tying in the contours for the proposed road on the plans.
Yeah.
And you said you would do that.
No, we could do that.
And then the other
but,
thing,
yeah.
I don't know if this is doable or makes sense, but in terms of, picking the most extreme lot and to see what the grading would be required for that one lot, to see at least what we're getting up against.
I was gonna do them all.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So with that list of information, you shouldn't decide yet whether it's approvable until they come back with that information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that would help us clarify
So
our
I will do
concern.
the detailed grading. We'll do up lot 10 a little more detail, and we'll resubmit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments from our consultants? Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
So
John.
you're talking the June meeting?
When is this meeting?
That is May 30th.
Nothing else to do?
Moving on to discussing Hillside and Scott. And so if everyone can move to those plans, please.
Nope, those plans are for the 21st meeting. This is for discussion of the violation letter that was in your packet last week.
Oh, my
I
apologies.
believe, correct? Tom?
Yeah, well, it's a violation, and then, I can
Is
just
it this?
update you on the meeting we had with the highway super.
Okay, that's fine. They just were gonna open up the plan. I gave them the stuff for next week already.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay, so then your purpose here tonight is to bring us up to speed with what's happened since we last.
Yes,
Thank you.
okay, so, basically, they had a violation on cutting trees. That issue has been resolved. They've been issued a permit. Basically, they only drop dead trees, which is allowed under the town code. So John's here, he was the one, and he went in and got the permit. And so, I think that issue is finalized. The only other thing, at the last meeting, when we had the public hearing.
I'm sorry, Tom. John, can we just get your last name for the record?
Sorry, John Sorrentino with J6 Construction.
And just so I understand your comment, so there was a permit prior to the trees being cut, or the permit was retroactive, but
Was
because
retro.
of the situation that resolved the issue?
Yes.
Okay, so there's no movement to go to court. That was
We did it all.
that was all resolved.
We did it all.
Okay, just so we know where we're at. Thank you.
Basically, we had the public hearing last time, and we were asked to go out, and I met with Mark Ethel and John, the highway superintendent, and I had submitted plans. I know they were a little late, but it was because the meeting didn't happen till after the submittal date. So basically, we're installing, we had gone over, we're installing 2 catch basins on Hillside, and then we're actually gonna reinstall 2 catch basins that were installed by the highway department some time ago. They're not low enough, and then we're gonna put a new pipe in across Cooper and tie them into the catch basin. And it was the one guy that was from the public was having.
Because they're not working right now.
What? No, yeah, they don't catch any water, so basically.
Fix that problem.
Fix that problem. And we're putting the pipe across Cooper, the pipe that was there is corrugated, and it's kind of a little dilapidated, so we're gonna replace it with HDPE and get it across the street and reinstall a catch basin over there. And it was the guy, I think at 129 Cooper, that was having the problem. This will resolve the issue. The other part of the issue is the highway super says this Cooper Street is scheduled to be redone, and there's no crown in it, so that's part of the problem. The water was running across the road into the guy's front lawn, but in the interim, we're gonna put this in, and this should catch all the water that's either coming down Cooper or comes down Hillside, and we'll get it underground and into the drainage system. And then down on Scott Street, we're gonna reinstall, same thing, a catch basin's already there, gonna reinstall and lower it, and catch the water that's coming down Cooper and get it installed into the system that's on Cooper existing. And I think that's about it. I think they were the last issues, and I think we're trying to get a final approval at the next meeting, because I don't think there was any other outstanding issues at the time.
The public hearing was continued to your May 21st meeting, so you resolve the public hearing, and if it's appropriate, you'll take action. Tom, where do we stand with the private roadway easement and maintenance agreement? Were we going to look into the old version and the current proposal? I mean, we can make it a condition of any approval if the board approves, but
right.
I thought
there
I
is
had
an existing highway maintenance agreement that's between the 5 lots that we're doing and the co-op on Scott Street. That exists today.
And we met with the president of the co-op.
Yes, and went over that. I know the last time we tried it, as you heard in the public, nobody seemed to be interested. We were trying to get everybody on both Cooper and, or both on Hillside and Scott to sign up, but there's doesn't never seem to be any interest in
Well,
that.
send me the copy of the existing agreement and
Okay.
give us an outline letter of what efforts you've made and what is the proposed, show me the document that you proposed that you're showing the people so the board understands it.
Okay.
We agreed to join anything that's in effect right now, basically.
Yeah.
All right, so it would be comprehensive for everything, or do you want to have a separate one for Hillside and a separate one for Scott?
I think we were trying to do both of them together, because these 5 lots and that way if it falls apart, these 5 lots and the co-op cover both streets.
All right, so you're committed to join the existing agreement no matter what. You'll ask the other people if they want to join. Get me a copy of the agreement so I have it.
Okay, all right.
I don't know if this is interfering, but if you wanted to have 2 separate agreements, one for Scott and one for Hillside, the only reason I'd say that is I know Hillside had the undeveloped road to Chester
Right.
that at least one of the residents brought up, and I know if I lived on Scott Street, I wouldn't want to pay for it because that's not even my road, you know. So maybe if they were going to do that, it would be fair for the Hillside people to have the opportunity to pay for that if they wanted it, and the Scott Street to have a separate agreement to maintain that road. I mean, does that make sense to you guys, or am I don't know, or is that?
That's why I was asking. I thought the same thing.
Yeah,
It might
yeah, I
make
was
more
wondering
sense
if-
to have separate.
We never,
Well, we could, on these 2 lots, we could agree
to have them maintain
have them maintain the road, and anybody on the road that's willing to
Yeah,
join.
but just
can
say,
join.
these 3 new lots you have on the north and the other side of Scott Street, they would be responsible for that. And these guys on Hillside and your 2 proposed lots on Hillstride would,
Right.
could be, and maybe Scott Street would agree to theirs, and maybe Hillside would not, or vice versa, and then they can maintain or not maintain
I would-
in
I would
accordance with whatever
propose-
they agree.
I would propose the same contract and just.
Well, it could be the same agreement even, but just, it's kind of 2 separate
I would
streets,
like to
2
keep
groups
it
of people.
Separate streets also, but I don't
Yeah.
wanna, if these people don't agree to join it, does the,
Well, at least you combine the lots that you're, encumber the lots that you're creating here. And that's okay if the existing agreement is one that's satisfactory. We'll live with it when we don't have to, but if we're creating a new one, I'll send you the standard form that I know the town would approve.
okay.
Okay, you want to, yes, and I know that we had gone on this exercise probably, I think it was Keith,
Yep. You-
several years ago, and nobody wanted to sign, so, but that's, but like I say, there's an existing agreement that has the co-op and these 5 lots locked in to maintain the 2 streets.
The co-op owned all that property.
Probably
That-
at one
that's why
time,
it
and
was-
that's why they were a party to it when it was sold. So that exists. So I'll give you a copy of that,
Yep, thank you.
all right, and then,
Then we could do a separate.
And I'll send you
those
the
two
standard
lots.
agreement and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
report back how it goes.
okay. So I think that the only issue, well, they could make that a conditional of the final.
Sure, but I want to get started so you have some report as to what's happened.
Other comments? Questions?
Are you guys confident about the drains on Hillside in particular? Because you were saying 129 Cooper, I remember particularly, had a lot of flooding.
We went over with the highway super, we showed what was happening in the field. And he even acknowledged that the road Cooper has no crown on it, that's part of the problem, but he says his Cooper Street is not scheduled to be resurfaced for, he said probably in the next 3 to 4 years. So we said we would install the 2 catch basins and then reinstall the 2 that were there, drop the frames down and catch the water that's coming down Cooper, and we'll be catching the water. It's kind of a duplication, because now we got 4 catch basins within a little spot area, but there's no way we can get all that water picked up with just 2. It's too much grading around the corner, so we decided we'd put the 4 basins in and interconnect them all to collect the water.
I just have one question. I think between the descriptions you've given us and what's come out in the public hearing so far, gives us a good understanding of just how water flows through this area, and particularly in relation to the streets. The one thing that I'm just having trouble visualizing is the intersection of Hillside and Cooper compared to the intersection of Hillside, of Scott and Cooper. Is Scott and Cooper at a higher elevation? Does Cooper run downhill from Scott to Hillside? Because
Yeah, Cooper.
down your property, it's
Yeah,
a slope,
Yeah.
and it seems like everything kind of runs this way. So water carries this way, water carries this way. But on Cooper, it carries down this way.
Yeah, it wants to run from Hillside down to Scott. It's on a hill,
From Hillside to Scott, or Scott to Hillside?
Hillside.
I think it's this way. I think,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
129 is uphill a little bit, right? From 111 and 117.
Yeah,
That's what we're saying.
129's problem is
From Hillside.
water
It
comes straight across.
comes straight across on Hillside. There's no, and the basins that they put in there aren't low enough, so the water runs right by them and runs right across, and Cooper has no
Yeah.
crown in it.
Yeah, but
Cooper's
and
basically paid flat, so the water runs right across, and you can see
Yeah.
right where it runs right into.
I'm getting it. And I guess I'm just trying to clarify, Jeff. So the water's not coming down Cooper from 111 and 117. It's
No.
it's coming down
going-
Hillside.
It's coming down Hillside.
'Cause
and
129
the
is-
sheet flows across Cooper
Yeah.
and goes into his
That's
front
what.
yard.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's. I just wanted to make
And
sure.
that's why we have those, if you look, we got multiple basins
Yeah,
there.
we see
It's
that.
the only way,
Yes.
To
the
pick
real
up
thing
every-
needs, the road needs to be crowned. That would keep the water on this side of Cooper and send it down this way, but
They
in
don't
the
want,
end,
and they really don't wanna crown it until the
Till-
catch basins are fixed.
fix and everything.
They really don't wanna fix the catch basins, they want us to.
Yeah.
But even if they do crown it, it's a matter of having a large volume of water that comes down the road on one side of the road or the other.
Right.
It'll keep it out of the one gentleman's
Yeah.
yard, which is certainly a big
Okay.
improvement. But without picking it up somewhere and
Yeah,
bringing
dropping
it
down
bringing it
into the
underneath.
system. Yeah,
and
right,
it-
yeah.
So those catch basins have to be fixed.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
yeah.
More questions? All right, then we're ready to pick it up at our next meeting to
The only
continue
other
the.
question I
Yeah,
had,
yeah,
we
yeah,
had a
please.
bond amount approved by the town board, is it when, and then we, so our question is that the amount that's still acceptable?
I would think we need to have an update on the cost. It's been a number of years, right?
Okay, 'cause I think we did it in, I think 2016.
I mean, it shouldn't be hard. You're just updating the cost.
Unit
The-
prices.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, but then it has to go back to town board for approval?
yeah.
All right,
For the next meeting, you can have that for the next.
well, they can make it a condition of the final.
Yeah,
approval.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, okay, so yeah, I got the quantities and stuff here, so I'll call, your office and get the latest acceptable unit prices.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, and we'll let you do that, so. Okay.
See you on the 21st for the continuance of the public hearing.
Thank you.
But I'm not here.
Yes, you're flying solo.
That's why I gave a little on-job training.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Yeah, our meeting, not this Tuesday, but the following Tuesday, right. Okay, we have some minutes to go over.
Wait, did these guys want to talk it over or anything? Is that, no? Okay. Did you guys mind if I go? No, go ahead,
No.
go ahead.
No,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks.
Mike's
Thanks.
gonna be
Thank you.
abandoning too.
Yeah, I will in a second. Why not? Get going while the going's good.
Next meeting is your last meeting?
Did that make sense to you though with the two contracts for the two different roads?
Yeah,
I
I'll
mean,
say it.
Scott Street's a dirt road that needs a lot of work. I mean, no, Hillside.
It's about 30, maybe a little more, maybe a
Scott
little
Road
less.
is gonna be paved by
Somewhere in
these
there.
guys, so they're mostly done. The other road is gonna be half a dirt road and still has thousands of dollars worth of work, so they're differently situated, these two, they're not all gonna come to one agreement.
Okay.
Sorry,
So we're
minutes.
looking at minutes from January 10th, January 15th, and February 19th. If I can ask everyone to take a minute and just look over, first the one from January 10th, if you haven't already.
Just a lot of them already. Besides fixing the spelling of Jeff's name. Maureen doesn't know how to spell. Alright, I'll put it together better.
The first thing, the first thing, the first
Should I
thing.
miss that?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, now I'm gonna change over. Thought I can't spell it wrong.
Hey, good night, Mike.
No, that's me. He wouldn't look good in hot pants.
I think this looks good, actually. Most of the way through it. I don't know. Anything from you guys? sure that's how we spell hydrogeologist? I have no idea.
Nobody knows how to spell hydrogeologist, it doesn't matter,
All right, we're good then.
except hydrogeologist.
HG.
I believed you.
I didn't, and you think I didn't.
If we have no comments or revisions, if I can get a motion to adopt the minutes from January 10th, 2019.
I'll make that motion.
A second, please.
I'll say.
Who was that?
Jeff, or Jason.
Jason.
One of us.
Give it to Jason, give it to John. We'll simultaneous. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so moved. January 15th, on to January 15th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from January 15th.
Second.
John for the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And finally, for this evening, February 19th.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from February 19th.
And a second, please.
I'll second that.
Anthony, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any other business that anyone else would like to bring up? I just have one thing. If you haven't seen it yet, Noreen sent out a flyer from Rockland Municipal Planning Federation. There's 3 different upcoming trainings. I attended 2 of those last year, so I can just sort of speak to that a little bit. The first one, which Bonnie and one of her associates from Nelson Pope and Voorhees are some of the presenters at, is kind of an introduction to planning and zoning board issues. And although it's sort of introductory, I just took another version of that recently, and even there, it filled in a lot of gaps in things that I understood about what our processes are and responsibilities and how we function. The second one, interestingly enough, Rockland County requires everyone on planning and zoning to take this one every other year. It's a case law update, and they review all kinds of different land use cases and what the court's decisions have been. I took it very early on in my time on the planning board, and it was way over my head. But I'd like to think it would make a little more sense at this point. But the value of that, of course, being that by seeing how it actually works out in the court of law, comes back to really giving us a lot of information to inform our decisions. And the third one was just kind of an open, it seemed almost like an open discussion on a lot of different topics that are relevant to land use boards. So if you'll take a look at your calendar, it's always a good idea to get some of these trainings under your belt. We have the 4 hours that are required for the year. So it's a nice opportunity to do that. I know Orange County Municipal Planning Federation will be out with their calendar later in the year. So just that reminder, if I may. Again, any other issues before?
I was wondering,
Yeah,
if
please.
we don't have a monitor, or even if we do, it's really helpful and difficult to review the plans. I'm wondering if we could get an easel that we can put up a plan to look at when we're here.
Noreen, no, you can be our
Is there an easel
Easel
here in the
investigator.
building and a board?
I don't know whether there'd be anything to stick on that they would stay up.
Well, the black clips on a
All right,
paper board.
I'll look into it. But I don't know whether if we hooked it, I mean, I can not do board docs at night and make sure I have a flash drive. I usually try to remember the flash drive with all the apps on it, but it's in my desk. So it wouldn't have helped tonight.
Ah.
And soon we'll be in the and back in the town hall, so. Right,
Oh, yeah.
George?
Town hall?
Yeah,
The temple.
we're gonna be upstairs doing our meetings Sunday.
Do we have any sort of idea about how that room is going to be set up, especially as far as multimedia stuff and being able to access things like that? Will it?
It's gonna be an 81-inch screen in the front.
Okay.
There'll be monitors on the side, so you can look up, and there'll be monitors for the audience.
This'll
Or
take care of
maybe we'll
itself.
need
It'll be on
Don't
the-
worry about the
Well,
easel.
that's what I'm
Yeah,
wondering.
don't need
is-
it.
Maybe we should make the move, and then, I mean, I totally agree about the easel, you know, that would be wonderful.
When you're here, but
Right,
if I can, because I know you don't have it when Bonnie's not here,
yeah.
I'll try to remember to flash drive, and then we can just do it to my computer and.
Yeah, if you give us a heads up that, you know, then we'll try out one of those other laptops.
Yeah.
We found like a bunch. And iPads and.
Cleaning out a closet, were we?
Girl.
No, listen, that's great. I mean, obviously, if we have the ability to, you know, tie into Orange Planning's maps at the meetings and be able to go into that, looking at, you know, we know, like, particularly with Kingsville Synagogue, thank you. It was very helpful to go into the tax information and all that, the ownership. We learned some interesting data that way. So,
Well, I
yeah,
think
if we
even
have-
for a planning, public hearing, if we had an easel that, the public could look at before the meeting or during the meeting while other things are going on, it could be useful.
That's very true, right.
Well, we have
that's
two
been,
monitors again, so we have one for the public,
That's great. That's,
you know. But once we get in there, then we can broadcast live too. That's big plus.
Sounds good.
good, no chance for George to edit this out.
Well, yeah, no, you know,
Yeah, right.
yeah, that's kind of a
You-
consideration there.
He's one of these
Use your sneeze button. Okay, on
Oh,
that note, sorry.
One
Yeah, please.
For everyone at home, this next episode is Mike Donnelly's last hurrah, his swan
Yes.
song episode. So we'll have to figure out something between us to send off Mike Donnelly with.
Well, don't say anything now, he's gonna watch this.
Oh, he's not gonna watch
not
this.
For my birthday outing.
It's you
Talk
know,
off screen.
Right.
it's, all those superstars never watch their own shows.
sorry.
I do.
Okay, so we'd like, while we're addressing our viewers, we'd like to wish all the mothers out there in our viewing audience a happy Mother's Day. And on that note, if I can get a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Jason, a second, please.
I'll second that.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned.